Sure.
All right.
So the idea is that what I'll do is I'll kind of go over teams, and from there, did someone else join us, or are they just bouncing back and forth?
That's Jeremy. He's coming in.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go over kind of bookings and kind of how it works and what it is and what it isn't. And there'll be probably more training on this. We're actually working with Microsoft to do a whole suite of trainings, and they'll be directly from Microsoft. So it'll be pretty much every Microsoft product that is kind of available, anything from Word, Excel to this product, bookings. So what I did was, let me share my screen here. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know this, but I actually come from a teaching background. So the idea is that I know that if you want to look like you actually prepared, just create an outline and it works pretty well. So the idea is that what is booking? So it's just a calendar. That's all it is. It basically is a calendar that you can create. It links to your calendar or a group of people's calendars, and that is pretty much what it does. And from there, what can happen is you can make that public, or you can share only internally, and then people can actually go in and actually schedule pieces. So it is definitely marketed to businesses. So there are components of this that we probably will never use. So i.e., like if you watch their training videos on this, they talk a lot about like a hair cutting or hair salon. And they're like, okay, well, they can go online and they can book an appointment and they can book whatever service. And then directly from the app, you can essentially charge for said service. So just want to throw that out there that it has been kind of extended, and it can be used for your purposes. It can be used for a lot of different things, pretty much anything that you want scheduled. But the thing is that you're going to see a lot of stuff is marketed towards a business, because that's its ultimate goal, is to essentially be able to schedule, business offerings and then maybe charge for them depending on what it is. So just keeping that in mind, that it is essentially a calendar, and from there it is basically designed for people to schedule time on your calendar. So it will show availability based off your system and what you have for schedule, and you can control all kinds of things, like you'll see business hours and things as we get into it. So just kind of take that mindset and say, okay, it is for a business kind of piece, but it's also for, something that we could use here, because it's just a calendar that allows for scheduling. Okay, so what I want to actually talk about is there's multiple ways to access, and I'll show this. And then for pretty much the rest of the session, and I'll leave time for questions, there's essentially, I'll walk you through this process. So there's a couple different ways to access bookings. You'll notice that it actually is integrated with Outlook. So it is a web-based application. There is an app on your phone that you can get if you like mobile devices and those types of things. There is an application for this. But essentially what happens is you would just go to office.com or go directly here. And I'll send this outline out to everyone in the meeting that we'll just have that kind of quick links and some resources down here as well. But the idea is that it's just an Office product. So it's just part of Office licensing. I don't know if all of you have it available as a license. So the idea is that if you try to go to the steps that I'm going to show you, then just realize that if it's not showing up or has an error, I can just assign that license after the meeting. So a couple things. Now, office.com is the portal for pretty much everything. And that basically, if you go there, you'll see a button that says sign in. And once you sign in, you'll be greeted with a screen that's very similar to this. So if you've never actually looked at this, there's, your recent work that you're doing, because it's connected to OneDrive. You can see all kinds of different, documents and things that have been shared with me or whatnot. And then you see kind of your Office products over to the side.
Mike,
Now-
any way to make this bigger on your end or my end?
Okay. Yeah, I have a really large monitor. I was just going to ask that. Is this visible?
There we
How's
go.
that? Okay.
I could see into Bill's soul through his eyeball. He was leaning into it for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can't see anything, definitely interrupt me so that I'm not continuously rambling and you can't see anything. So if you're not aware, all of the Office products have online components to them. So if you're ever, on a computer and you need to edit a Word document or PowerPoint or whatever, they're all accessible there, including, things like OneNote, which is what I created this kind of template or kind of workflow in. And then you can see you can access Teams from the web. And the one big key with this is this All Apps button. And this is where a lot of people don't realize I have kind of access to maybe more apps than you will, but there's a lot more things that are available through your Office license that you might not have ever actually taken a look at. Okay. And there's some cool stuff like Microsoft Lists. And I'm not going to go through all of these because I honestly don't have time. But you can see things like there's a list tool to create like to-dos. There's a planner. And these products, because they're all Microsoft, will integrate into all kinds of different things. So if you like to use Teams primarily, because that's where you do all your work in, you can actually add all of these apps to Teams. And you can access them right within there. So things like Planner, to-do lists, they're all integrated in Microsoft Teams. And you can see things like OneDrive. And there's other tools. So for example, I was working with Jeremy on forms. You probably, if you filled out that COVID form, I almost said stupid COVID form, but anyways, the idea is if you fill that out every day, it is essentially a Microsoft form. And you have access to do those as well. Things like Microsoft Sway, which is kind of a presentation report. It's kind of like a web page newsletter thing. If you've ever used Wix, it's very similar to that. There's Microsoft Whiteboard. The point in this is there's all kinds of different things that you can, access in here. So if you've never actually, clicked on these things and played with them, you might want to actually give it a look. So there's some things like you don't have access to the security portal and those pieces, but most people have access to, the basics, Planner, to do, PowerPoint, SharePoint, all those different things, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there because a lot of people just say, oh, I wish we had software for this. And they're like, we do, it's Microsoft has it, right? And this is part of that training aspect. We were gonna do a lot more on these applications, but we kind of ran into COVID. And that kind of messed some things up. So this is something that we definitely are going to give more training on, pretty much all of these apps, either by myself or through Microsoft. So anyways, this is one way to access bookings. If eventually, as you start to use the applications, it will show up in kind of your quick launch bar over here. If you've never actually accessed it, you could click on the All Apps and then you'll see it on this list. This list is searchable. So basically you can actually go in here and just start typing in bookings and it'll show up. So if you wanted to, you could basically go directly to outlook.office.com/bookings, and that will bring you directly to your bookings page. By the way, if you are in any Microsoft product, you can click up on this little stack of dots and you can actually swap back and forth, and it's a single sign-on. So if I wanted to switch to Sway, I could click on that and it would open it up. Okay, so if you're going back and forth between applications, you can do that here. Any questions on the access piece? So essentially, the fastest way, if you ever forget, is office.com is where you go for essentially any Office product. Okay, so if you've never used bookings before, it's going to basically start the initial creation. And as I said, and I'll walk you through that process, I'm going to show you how that works. And feel free to follow along. So a couple caveats before we get started here. first of all, there's multiple ways to actually approach this, and I can work with, whatever department head or whoever is actually going to want to coordinate this. So for example, I'll show you this demo later, but Lauren has already created a bookings page. So what you can do is you could have one single page that everyone can be added in. They're going to be listed as staff, and we'll talk more about that. Or each individual can have their own bookings sites. Or essentially all this is a calendar. You can have multiple booking calendars for multiple purposes. And what happens is they're basically just a web link that you would share or post on the website or whatever in terms of a process. And you could create as many of these as you want. So if you want to get in here and test and create something and play around with it, feel free. Okay. And the only way people are going to access it is if you actually open it up to, and I'll show you in that initial process how that actually works. But the idea is that it's a tool that you can use essentially to create multiple, calendars. That's all they are. And then you can essentially assign services to that and people can register. Or what you can do is just have a team one that basically multiple people are part of, and you can have your schedule. So it really depends on the purpose. So again, you could have a team one and be part of that, and also have a personal one that you use for other tasks. So just keep in mind that this is something that is pretty flexible in terms of a process, and there's no limit as to how many you can create. Okay, so I have a test one here, and you'll see that as we get into this, it's basically just a calendar and it's pretty basic, but I'm going to go up here and essentially do a new bookings calendar. So you can kind of, what was
Mike,
that?
can you zoom in on this too?
Okay, yep. Let me zoom in here.
Oh,
Too
nice.
far. Okay. And by the way, if you don't know or have never actually tried this, if you hold down the control key on your keyboard and use your mouse wheel, it will actually zoom in and out. Okay. So sometimes I do that and I'm just surprised that people don't know that piece. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay. Is that a little bit better? I'll take silence as yes. Okay. So all I did was I went up here. So if you want to create a new bookings in terms of a new calendar, I just clicked up here and clicked new bookings calendar. Okay, so from here, what you can do is you can create from scratch, which is what I'm going to do, or you can clone. So once you actually start getting these rolling, you can actually set up and basically take the settings from other calendars that you've already created. So I'm going to do a create from scratch. And this process is pretty straightforward. Essentially, you're going to start by giving it a name. So I'm not very creative. So M Campbell test 2 sounds good. And this name is actually going to be visible in terms of a process. So just realize, and you can change it, but realize that the idea is that this is going to be a visible name for the calendar. Okay. And we'll talk more about branding later, but you can add logos. So you could add like the EMCC logo if you wanted to, or if your department has its own individual logo, you could add that. If you just want, a picture of yourself or something like that, you could add that as well, if it's like a personal piece. So there is the ability to add logos. And this choose business type, it honestly doesn't matter, but obviously you're probably going to choose education in terms of a process. I think all this does is it gives you a couple different options when it comes to creating, services and things like that. But if you chose healthcare, it's really not going to matter in terms of, how it actually functions. So I'm going to create calendar. And this essentially is going to add your services. So this is where we get into kind of the first piece. You can see the word customers over here, but also services. So technically our students are customers, but we don't technically usually talk about them as being customers. So the idea is that, we understand that it's a service, we provide services. That term probably is not that big of a deal, but remember that this is from the perspective of a business, okay? So these services are what people are going to be able to book. So if we go to the hair salon idea, it could be something like, a haircut or, a perm or something like that, okay? So those would be the different services that you offer. And what happens is, depending on the service itself, that will determine how long it is. So again, if you're dealing with tutoring, as Jeremy does, the idea is that, a session might be longer depending on what it is. So if you're, doing a math tutoring session, that might be an hour, where, an initial kind of consult, or whatever you would term that, meet and greet, whatever, that might be 30 minutes. Okay. So this is the idea. And you can add these afterwards. If you actually come and say, oh, I need to add more services, I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to leave this at the initial consult, but you can see basically when this service is available and how long it is. And I'll show you how to edit and add these afterwards, okay? So that's what you're doing. So essentially your calendar is going to allow customers, and those will be created when they sign in, and I'll show you how that process works once we create this. And it's going to allow them to book services. That's all this does. It's a calendar that shows your availability, and then it lets someone actually see that and then schedule in time that will show up on your calendar as a service, whatever it is. And you can control the timing and time frame for that. Any questions on that? Okay, so I'm going to hit continue. And this is an important piece here. And again, all of these pieces can be changed afterwards. So if you're in the testing phase, the idea is that you might want to make it private. People in my organization, that is going to include students and staff, faculty. So anything with an emcc.edu or student.emcc.edu account, and anyone is going to be public, okay? So what is the point in this? I don't think I really have to describe private anymore, but the two that are important are people in my organization and anyone, okay? So the way it works is, if you choose people in my organization, they're going to have an EMCC account, okay? So if you want to open this up to anybody, i.e. maybe new students that haven't had account activations, or new students that are considering basically attending EMCC, but they don't have accounts and they're not in Jenzabar or anything like that, you need to set this to anyone. And that means that anyone basically that has the link, or is able to click on that on the website, is going to be able to access this. If you set it to this, they're going to have to not only sign into Office, okay, but they're going to have an EMCC account. So the idea is it could go either way depending on what purpose of the calendar is. And you might have calendars that are open to anyone, and you might have some calendars that are basically only open to people inside the college. Okay, does that make sense? Man,
Yes, it does.
okay,
Yes.
it's just like teaching a college class. No one answers anything.
I think everyone's muted, which is why, so you're getting lots of nods and thumbs up.
Okay. So I'm gonna basically set this to anyone, just as a test here, but just keep in mind that, and this can be modified at any point, but that has purpose. Okay, so if I hit complete setup, it's going to actually basically say that people can book appointments. So this is the link that it actually creates. And in this case, you can see that it has the name. That's why I'm saying that the name is important. So if you say like stupid test calendar, and then you decide, hey, I'm going to actually keep this as my name, you want to probably change that process in terms of a offering before you actually end up publishing that somewhere, because they're going to see it in the link. The other thing that you're going to see is you'll see a lot of student.emcc.edu piece. That does not mean that I am a student. What happened is when we migrated everyone to the cloud, because students were already existing there first, and this is before, you know, Bert and I even started on board. This is the way they set it up initially. Unfortunately, they set it up so that it's basically student is the primary. So you're going to see that on a lot of web services. And the cool thing is you can embed this calendar so they don't even actually have to see the link. But that is okay. You're going to see that when you create a calendar. I'm not logged in as a student account. I'm logged in as myself. Just don't worry about it. So if I get started, it's going to bring me to this calendar. And let me dismiss that. So first thing over here, this shows you what calendar you're actually logged into. Okay, and this is the drop down. So if I want to actually switch back and forth, that's what this open another calendar is for. And what I can do is I can start typing the name and it will eventually find it. I'm not wanting to switch right now, but I could find that calendar. I can also create another one if I so chose to actually, if I want to keep adding booking calendars. And now I'll just start this process again. If you notice, basically it's saying I can clone from an existing, and this one is showing up now as well, because that is the active calendar that I'm in. Okay, so a couple things here. You'll see that you have some menus over here off to the side. So you'll see that it has a calendar, and this works just like calendars in Excel, or not Excel, Outlook, sorry. The idea is that you basically have, you know, a today view. You can actually go through and you know, pick a date in terms of a process. You can do certain things like adding time off on here, and that will sync to the calendar. Okay. And, you know, you can see day by staff, work week, month. So it's basically a calendar. Okay.
Can I ask a
And what-
question?
Yes.
And maybe this is a process question, but does it make sense to add things to the bookings calendar or to your Outlook calendar as a primary, as far as like different events that are happening? Do
So
we get to decide, or?
they're kind of working together, so it really depends on what you're adding. So in most cases, what's going to happen is typically the default behavior is that it's going to actually not really show. So in this case, if I'm actually looking at the calendar, or another person is looking at the calendar, they don't see basically your, you know, appointments. What they do is they actually just see availability.
Okay.
So it actually works both ways. So in here, I could add basically a new booking and schedule it and do that manually, and it will show up on my, and I'll show you this process. It'll show up in my calendar, or I can basically set my availability and do my normal scheduling. And then when someone actually goes to register for a time, they won't see that block as being available because of the fact that I have it scheduled already.
So it doesn't matter. They sync up. So if you were putting
They
time
basically
on-
go back and forth. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that's why, again, if you actually look, it's outlook.office.com. It's actually integrated directly with Outlook. So it's basically just another calendar in Outlook. And I'll show you the email piece here in a few minutes. It's where you can actually see that. Okay. So a couple other things in here. One thing that I like about this is you can actually do your day. So you can actually see all your bookings. And if you're the type of person, which, you know, I don't know, but there are some people that like this, you can actually print in right in here or export in Excel. And the idea is that we'll talk more about the export piece later. You can actually have like a agenda. Some people like to do that. I mean, I hate killing trees, but the idea is that some people are kind of analog in that fashion. So if you have to have it in front of you, you could do that by printing. If you wanted to see your entire month booking. The other thing that you could do, keep in mind, is you could export, or you could actually print this as a PDF if you needed to send it to someone and say, you know, this is what I have scheduled and whatnot. So we'll come back to the calendar here in a little bit. So customers, no one is actually enrolled in here yet. So what I can do is I can add a new customer. So I can add a student, and I'll show you that this is probably not the way that you're going to want to do this. You could add these in manually, but the aspect is that there's probably an easier way. And the easier way is when they fill out a form, they will get added in for you. So this menu is just basically to see all of the people that have essentially used your form. So once they actually use the form and actually enter that in, and I'll show you that process here in a minute, what will happen is they will then show up here, okay? And then you have your settings. So this is essentially where you add multiple people. So if you want to add people to this calendar, the idea is that I can actually just search for them in here. For example, I can actually start typing in names, and I can actually search. So they're not in there. It's not going to show up because I'm searching for nothing. So this actually confuses a lot of people because they're thinking, oh, I want to search staff. So I want to search people and add them. That's not how this works. This only searches the staff that you have. Okay. So in this case, notice there's no one in other staff. So if I type in L Quinn, like I started, it doesn't show up. But if I want to add people, so if I want to add Lauren to this calendar to be able to use, what I would do is add new staff, and then I would start typing in L Quinn, and notice she appears. Okay. So a lot of people can get concerned about that, or they, are wondering what is happening. The idea is that it's essentially a, just searching that process. And I'll show you how that works here in a minute. So I can add her as, an administrator to this calendar. And notice right here that I can, notify them. So as soon as I hit save, she's going to get an email. Okay. And there's some things here. So events on office calendar affect availability. So this is basically the personal calendar. So this is what I'm talking about, that sync. So Lauren has a calendar, and what happens is when she puts availability on that, that's going to actually directly sync when I have that checked off, okay? And maybe she is not using normal business hours. Maybe she has different hours. If you were doing this for, maybe an employee or a tutor that has different hours, then the idea is you would just modify that, okay? So this can be granular based off, the business, or you can actually edit it for the individual. So this is just basically using my business hours, which I haven't modified. It's just standard 8 to 5. Or I can actually say, Lauren comes in a little bit later. Maybe different days she does different things. So that actually impacts her availability as well. So again, it doesn't make sense to have her listed as 8 to 5 if she's not here at 8. So you don't want people booking for times that she's not here. So you can actually get very granular with this. Right now, I'm actually going to leave this with the default. And if I hit save changes, okay, notice Lauren shows up as other staff. And if I start searching here, the idea is that I will actually be able to find her in the filter. It just hasn't refreshed yet. So she will get an email. She doesn't have to verify that she got an email, but eventually she will get an email saying that she has been added to this calendar. And the idea is that I'll show you what that looks like in terms of a process, but she'll be able to actually go in and make changes to this calendar because I made her an administrator.
I got the email already.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So what happens is there are multiple options here. So administrator, that means they can do anything to the calendar. So obviously, if you want to give someone administrative status, they could basically go in and change anything. So if you're doing a team calendar, maybe only one person can edit. If you're adding someone to your calendar in terms of a process, but they just need to view, there are options for that. So you can see there's just a viewer. So they can actually go in and see it, but they can't make any changes. A guest can be assigned, but they can't open the mailbox. We'll talk more about that later if we have time. That's a little bit more advanced. And that doesn't mean that someone has to be added as a guest to actually use the form. This is a little bit different process. Scheduler, they can go in and manage bookings and customer details, but they can, not change settings, staff, and services. And then a team member can manage their own calendar. So you can have a team, and then within that, you can have multiple calendars under there. So there's different options that you can do. Just be, as you're setting this up, if you have any questions about what, means what, then I'd be more than happy to help. And I didn't go over things like changing the color and adding phone numbers because I don't think that matters, but you can add that in. And notice right within here, I can actually book appointments manually. I can see her contact info. This is pulled right from Outlook. I can see her status. Basically, right now she's bookable, which means I can assign her, process. I can see her availability. So notice this is what a user would see as well. So they wouldn't be able to actually book an appointment during these times. Okay. So when they actually go to her calendar or this calendar, what happens is that, and I'll show you this calendar here in a minute, they're not going to be able to actually book anything between 10 and 11. Okay, so that wouldn't even show up as an option. Okay, so that's how you add staff. Again, staff are people that have the ability to use the calendar, and I'll show you how this works when you actually see the calendar. So a couple things here real quick. Services, as I said, these are your offerings. So these would be different things like, again, you might break up tutoring, you might have, a student meeting, whatever it is that you're going to offer for, a process in terms of, could be anything. And you can add as many services as you want. So I could say, IT service, if I was making this for IT, I could say, student meeting, whatever you want. And you can add descriptions. I'm a big believer that you probably want to put in descriptions because it defines what it is. You can assign specific locations, okay, in terms of a process that you want to assign that, okay. You can add an online meeting. So one of the questions that I know people are going to ask is, does this integrate with Zoom? And the answer is not yet, okay. You could actually send Zoom links and things out through this, but because it's a Microsoft product, when I add this online meeting, it's going to actually use Microsoft Teams, okay? So if you've not used Teams to schedule outside meetings, it's gotten a lot better. So it used to be that they had to have a Microsoft account, they had to log in, they had to be even in your enterprise. Now it's actually because Microsoft is actually dumping a ton of money into Teams because of the whole COVID piece, that the idea is that you can actually essentially send these links to outside people and they can actually access it. And they could do it online. Teams is available online as well. So I'll show you how this works here in a second. But when they book, it will actually send them an online meeting piece.
Should we start using Teams? Like, is that the preferred?
So if you're going to want this to directly integrate meetings and automatically send those out and schedule the online meeting, then I would probably say yes.
Okay.
Now there is a lot of for this purpose. I'm not saying that you have to completely dump Zoom. We're using Zoom right now. They use Zoom a lot for other persons and things like that and other reasons. But I think if you're using bookings because of this online integration and it's going to be a lot easier, I would recommend using essentially Teams for this purpose.
Okay.
Because if you didn't do it otherwise, what you would have to do is you would either have to attach the link. So you would have to go in and basically put in the Zoom room link, kind of like what Liz did here, or you would have to actually create the description and then send it to them, create the meeting and then send it to them. I think it would be a lot easier just to use Teams, and we'll see this process here because when I add this, it's automatically going to use Teams.
Great.
Quick question, sorry. Okay, so Teams integrates directly with bookings, right? But then Brightspace integrates directly with Zoom. Is there a way to, I mean, I guess, I don't know, I'm just thinking about students and you know what I mean? Different contexts and accessing the meetings. Like, is Teams now as similar to Zoom so that if they get a link, they're just going to be able to click on it and access it? So
Yes.
it's, okay, so
Yep.
even if we're sending them a link, whether it's Teams or Zoom, it's the same process for them to access the meeting, right?
Yes. So what will happen is when they schedule, and I'll show you this process, when they're going to schedule that, it will actually generate an email. And in that email, they'll say, click to join Teams, the meeting. And it works pretty much just like Zoom. So what happened was Microsoft Teams, when they first started, was something that they were kind of still developing. It actually replaced, I don't know if people know this, but Skype for Business. Microsoft owns Skype. That was actually what Teams was kind of before, and they kind of sunsetted that. It's still there. They haven't fully killed it off, but they're like, Teams is a new thing. And Teams was pretty new when COVID started. And then they've been putting all of their eggs kind of in that basket. So it's actually come quite far. And they've obviously ripped off Zoom and most of this stuff. So the idea is that it's very similar now.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. So you can set durations for this. And this buffer time is good for people like me that talk a lot and love to hear their own voice. So if you know that you're going to run over, what you can actually do is set a little bit buffer. So what it will do is it will actually compensate for that. So you could say, add 5 minutes of buffer time. So what happens is that adds basically that buffer. So that means that they can't stack meetings right on top of each other. You're going to have at least 5 minutes of a window between, your scheduling. Okay. And that can be very important when you're dealing with, students things. Because, I don't know about you, but if we're helping you in IT and like the meeting goes long, and I'd be like, no, click and like hang up and be like, we're done. Talk to me tomorrow in the scheduled window. It doesn't work that way. And I'm sure your meetings don't work that way either. So you might want to give yourself, when you're adding services, a little bit of a buffer. And it might be, as simple as a minute, or you might be 5-10 minutes. Usually what I would recommend is 5 to 10 minutes. Some people do 30-minute buffers in terms of a process, but just realize that that is going to limit your scheduling. So whatever you do for a buffer is going to limit your pool. You're taking 5 minutes between meetings out of every, meeting possibility, right? As I said, there's pricing in here. I don't think we're probably ever going to use that. You can add notes. This is mostly for the internal. And you can set up maximum number of attendees. So the idea is that if you want to make it so that people can schedule in at the same piece, you can do that. In most cases, it's probably going to be a one-on-one thing. Just like the hair cutting analogy, you can't cut 2 people's hair at the same time. Maybe you could, but probably not very well. So if you're doing a one-on-one, conferencing, maybe not. But in Jeremy's case, if they're doing a tutoring session, they might have multiple people in that session, depending on what it is. So if they're like, I'm going to teach, how to do algebra, and, they're going to have multiple people, you can have, multiple people in that attendee session.
So, Michael, I have a question for you in regards to that online meeting bit. Does that give the customer or the student the option to select the online meeting or not? Because I'm just thinking for a lot of our customers, some will be in person and some will be online. And do we need to add 2 separate services, one for an online and one for an in-person?
You could. What's going to happen is that if you have that online meeting piece checked, what it will do is it will just email them an online meeting. But the idea is if you've already established that you're going to meet in person, they can just ignore that email. Or you could have, like you said, 2 services. You could basically say, in-person meeting or online meeting, and you could give them that option.
Thank you.
Yeah, if it was me, I would probably do the two separate, depending on how you want to set that up. The other thing is if you have a lot of services or offerings, then I mean that might get cumbersome if you're basically doing, online versus, if you have to do two for each. But if you have like just one service, you just have to do two, and it's probably not that big of a deal.
Thanks.
So what happens is this let customers manage their appointment when it was booked by you or your staff. That lets them kind of, if you go in and manually assign it, that lets them basically modify that. So they can reschedule it. They can do things like that. This is usually not probably that big of a deal to enable. And in most cases, you're probably not going to want to manually assign pieces anyways. So a couple other things over here. You can see you have options. So availability, again, you can do timing in 30 minutes increments. You can, set up lead time, how much, lead time can they book? So can they book basically that day, or do they have to book it a day in advance? That's what this 24 hours is. Basically how far out can they book in a meeting? So you can actually get very granular. I'm not going to go through all of these options just for the sake of time because we're already running out of time. But just keep in mind that these are the defaults, and the defaults can be modified. And what happens is you can actually change these for each individual thing. So you could say, I can have, a minimum of 2 hours lead time in terms of booking or whatnot. You can assign staff. So what this does is you can let them choose, or if this was, say, math tutoring, you would assign that. So if someone schedules a math tutoring session, it's going to go to your math tutor. Okay. If you have multiple math tutors, what happens is you can allow them to choose, and you can assign different staff members. So I could say, this is me and Lauren, and I want to allow the person to choose, or I can say, it's just me. You have some options in terms of that. Custom fields, we'll get more into this, but this is what you're requiring them to actually fill out in terms of a process. So do you want them to give you your email? Do you want them to provide phone number, probably address or notes? You can actually turn these off and on. You can actually add more custom fields. I'll show you that real quick. But the idea is that you can actually go through and choose these. If it's marked as required, they have to fill it out, obviously, before they can actually submit that assignment. And the final thing, reminders, okay? What happens is that you can actually go through and notify the business via email when a booking is created. So this is actually going to email basically saying a booking was added. So anyone that's in that kind of group is going to get that. You can send a meeting invite to the customer in addition to the confirmation email. So you can do different things with this. Enable text messaging notifications for your customer. So this basically is actually something that does work. If they give their phone number, you can actually have it text them basically updates. So if you go in and modify or anything like that, then basically they'll send it. And notice it's kind of in preview. They're still testing this. It might be a little bit buggy. I've used it. It works pretty well. You can change what the email says. You can add reminders. So it's set for a day before. You can do a day, 15 minutes. You can set all kinds of different email reminders so that they actually get notified. And again, this can be per task. So if you want it to be different on one versus another, you can. Okay. Any questions on any of this real quick?
I don't know that it's necessarily on this, but can this integrate with a form, with forms? So my thought is that this would be where the student signs up for a meeting and lets us know what they want to talk about. But then I also am thinking of creating a form so that when a student does come in, I can make more notes about what we actually met about as a way of tracking. And so ideally, if they could talk to each other, like if this booking could be sent into a form and then I could just add the notes
So it doesn't really integrate with Microsoft Forms.
Okay,
There is the ability to dump data out, and there is the ability to do some kind of pieces to that. So let me get back to that.
sure.
And if I forget to answer it in the 15 minutes that we have, definitely let me know. And if
Okay.
you have questions, and we can do some one-on-one stuff as you get and play around with it, or you can just email me and I'll get back to you.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm gonna save this. So I have one service there, and what you would do is you would do that for each service in terms of a process. Notice this has the little Teams logo. That's what the Teams logo looks like. That means that that meeting has an online, component to it. If I go, and I do not check off that add online meeting, notice it does not have that. So that's a quick way to, if you're actually editing your services, to actually see, what is what. Is this going to create an online meeting when they schedule it? Yes. And like I said, these can be granular. So I can make this, 50 minutes if I want to. And basically you can see that you can modify each one. So I don't have a lot of time on custom fields, but you can actually do a text question or drop down question. So basically what happens is this is actually something that you can add to the actual booking kind of menu, so that when they are actually filling that out, things like email address and those types of things, you can actually add as much as you want. So if you wanted to create like a little mini form in here in terms of a process, you can add multiple questions. Okay. So I'm going to discard that. Before I get to the booking page and show you that, I just want to show you some business information pieces. This is where you actually modify the actual kind of appearance of the actual bookings. And you can actually go in and rename it right here. You can add a location. You can choose where the replies go to. Okay. You can set up more information here. You can actually go in and add a logo if you want to add a logo. So that could be your EMCC logo. And this is where you modify the default business hours. So that's what business information is. Okay. So let me actually take this. And this right here, the bookings page, this actually shows you essentially the URL. You can copy that by clicking that. You can share and send that to someone, or if you're actually wanting to embed this directly in a web page, you would use this embed. So if you're going to put this on your, on the EMCC webpage or my EMCC, the idea is we can actually book that and change that. And notice right here, I can actually modify who has access to it. So make it private, make it available to the organization, make it available to anyone. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, let me go here, and I'm just opening an incognito window. Okay, so this is basically what is seen. So the idea is that I made this available to everyone. Okay, so notice it didn't ask me to actually log in. Okay, so that's the thing. If I change this to a login, okay, and set to anyone in the organization, and I copy this, let me go back to my incognito window. It brings me right to a login. So that's the difference between the two. So keep in mind that if you have it set like this, they have to have a student.emcc.edu account or an emcc.edu account to access. If they do not, that form will not appear. Okay. So I'm just going to log in with my student account. Okay. And as I logged in, it shows me essentially the booking piece. So what happens is right here, I have my options. Okay. So these are the services if you will. So student meeting in person, student meeting. I probably should have made that say online. But notice they have a different logo here. That basically means that it's an online meeting. So they can actually tell the difference. And if you mouse over that, it actually says that's what that means. This is an online meeting, okay? And you can actually see more, information that just tells you the duration of it and so on. So remember, I actually have it set out so that they could technically schedule a year in advance. That's default. So they can actually go forward. But the idea is that it's set that they have to give some lead time in terms of a process. So in this case, notice that it's only letting me schedule for the 12th. And the reason that is the case is that it is set for 24 hours of lead time. So that means they can't book for today. And because of business hours, Saturday and Sunday were closed. So it's smart enough to say they can't schedule when you're closed, obviously. So it's only letting them I can't click on the 9th. There's no availability, okay? And that can be modified per task, right? So on the 12th, I can see right now anyone. So this would be everyone in terms of staff. So if you're going to leave it open that anyone can actually be booked, or I can actually, choose. And going back to the hair salon piece, the idea is that sometimes you might, get your hair cut and one person butchers it. You're like, I'm never going back to that person. So you can book your stylist, right? So I get my hair cut a lot. As you can tell, I have no idea what I'm talking about. But the idea is that you can actually go and choose the person, and the availability is going to actually be different depending on when you actually schedule that. And what happens is this actually says I'm available, okay? And this would list my times, okay? So you can actually set, different pieces. This is doing 30-minute increments because that's what I actually set it to, which might not make sense because I made it a 50-minute meeting. So just realize that if you make changes, it might, do some weird things with timing. So you probably want to, if you set it to 50 minutes, set it to 50-minute increments. So it makes more sense. You probably would not do a 50-minute meeting. It'd probably do, 60 minutes every hour, every 30 minutes, that kind of stuff. But the idea is that they can actually choose. This is going to be Michael Campbell, and I did not set these to be required for this, but if you notice right here, it actually does not say optional, okay, for these, but address is optional. And you can actually remove it entirely, okay? So I'm going to say, my name is, I'm logging in as joe.test. And you can choose what they actually have to fill out. And these two are optional. Notes are optional. Fix my computer. And all you have to do is hit book, okay? Oh, sorry, I didn't pick a time. So I'm going to say 11 a.m. book. And then what it's going to do is it's going to book that meeting. So if I actually go back, and that's working on it. If I go back to my calendar, eventually what will happen is I will actually see basically that booking appear for the 12th. And I don't know why that's running really slow. Okay, there it goes. So again, they have the ability to reschedule or cancel their booking. So if they're like, I can't make that, that would probably be preferable to, I've talked to Jeremy about sometimes some people don't even show and they might not tell you. So if you give them the ability for them to actually go and, reschedule or whatever it may be, that would be beneficial. So if I refresh this, and notice now I can see Lauren Quinn, I can see no staff, I can see a couple different things. So if I go to my 12th, I can see Lauren's calendar is listed as busy. So if I actually want to, show myself, I can actually see my calendar in here. I can get rid of no staff. So I can just show Lauren, I can show myself. So you can actually modify what you see. notice this is in here. Okay, I did get an email. So what I will do is let me switch to my Outlook to show you that. So what happens is I actually got 2 meetings because of the fact that this is basically saying they set us up, and this is for me directly. So this shows up, okay? And this is basically just saying that they're scheduled. So I can click view and bookings and it'll bring me to that. And if I look at my Outlook calendar, once it loads, what I can actually see for the process, if I actually have my right calendar open. I have too many calendars here. It hasn't refreshed yet. But I can actually, I'll be able to see this on my calendar as a process. Sometimes it takes seconds to sync to your Outlook calendar. But it did send me an email saying that it's coming. It's showing up on my bookings page, and that's kind of how it works. This is an example. We're kind of running out of time. This is kind of what Lauren has put together, and you can see an example of. And I like this about Lauren's. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. So you can see she has the availability, and then she added these additional options. So you can choose, meeting location, in-person Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and then basically you have options here. So you could do this either in offerings, or you could just have one single offering and basically or service, and then they could schedule for that. So her service in this case is student appointment. So she left that basically open. And then what happens is they can actually select down here. Or she could have multiple services, and then they could choose, and depending on the services, you could choose, what shows up as offerings and things like that.
I did just
So-
update it, so it's online or in person. So if you refresh it, it'll.
Okay. And let me just show you from the student side, because we're running out of time here. Okay, so what happened is they basically got this, essentially saying that they booked it. That will show up on their calendar. In this case, there was a reminder set that because it was set to a day, so it's a business day. And if you actually look, they can actually go in and change their appointment by clicking these links. And you can control how many notifications they get, because that kind of seems excessive, okay? Now, what happens is if I choose an online meeting, let me actually go here and let me do this one. We'll choose. Okay, and I can't check that off. I said that it would do SMS, but this person didn't add their phone number. So if I add my phone number, okay, that's my cell phone. Don't write that down. Okay, so that is scheduling it. So if I give that a second, what will happen is this will actually send me a confirmation, and you'll see that it will actually have essentially the meeting for Teams as well. And I'll show you that process. So basically this sent me, and notice this is a little bit different. So this basically says join your appointment. So what would happen is, in this case, I'm logged in as a test student account, but they would just click join their appointment, and it's going to load Teams. In this case, notice it's loading because I was in the web. It's loading Teams in the web, and it will actually connect to that appointment, kind of like when they click on a Office link or things like that. It will actually connect them to Teams, and then basically, in this case, it's going to act weird because it's not ready and I haven't started it, but that's all they would actually do. So because I had online appointment checked off, it's automatically going to send them that Teams request. So that day when they actually go. And if I'm actually looking at my calendar as a student, what happens, and again, it will eventually sync all of these calendars to the process. Sometimes it takes a second in Outlook. They'll see that, and what will happen is they can actually click on it there as an event. But that's basically kind of bookings in a nutshell. You can see they got another email saying it's confirmed. They can get reminders, and the reminders will actually show the appointment. If they use a different tool than Outlook, it does send an ICS file, which is basically just a calendar file that they can import in, and they have a link to manage their bookings, and they also have a link to the Microsoft Teams page as well. Okay,
Mike-
so I'm out of time. What was that?
I just wanted to ask a quick question. So those of us who can access the app on Outlook, we just need to submit a ticket to you.
Yes, submit a ticket or email me in this case, and what I will do is I just have to give you access to the licensing.
Thanks so much, Mike. This has been very helpful, and I am it has been recorded, so as soon as I upload it, I will send everybody the link.
Okay. Oh, and it looks like people were in the chat, and I wasn't paying attention to the chat. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, if you have any questions, definitely let me know. I think the best way is to get in there and play with it. And remember, you can create as many of these as you want. So if you just want to play with one, make it private, and you can just kind of play with it. If you want me to submit something, so you can actually play with that process. If you want to try to schedule something, and I could show you how that Teams piece works, I'd be more than happy to help out.
So,
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
or Liz, is it okay to like go ahead and make it live? If
I'm fine with that. If you're ready
Yeah.
to roll. Yeah.
Cool. Okay,
Okay.
awesome.
Thanks again, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Okay, no worries. Have a good day.
Yep.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.